Hello, and welcome to our lecture on Chapter 13, the Central Nervous System. We're going to continue our conversation talking about the different parts of the brain, and this video will specifically focus on the diencephalon. The diencephalon is going to be a very deep structure in the brain. It's going to be located here, and it will be sandwiched between the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. It consists of three parts: the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. So let's look at those parts in a little bit more detail. So in this diagram, we have a sagittal section of the brain, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at the diencephalon. The diencephalon is painted in purple here, and we're going to have three regions. The thalamus, that is going to wrap around the interthalamic mass or interthalamic adhesion, the hypothalamus located here, and the epithalamus located here. I almost think that the diencephalon looks like a bird's beak, and so the thalamus would be the head, with the interthalamic mass being the eye, and the hypothalamus would look like the bird's beak. Okay, let's go through the different regions and what they are. So the structure of the thalamus. The thalamus is going to be two egg-shaped structures that are going to be located deep inside the brain. And these two egg-shaped structures are going to be connected using the interthalamic mass. And it's important that they are going to help surround the third ventricle. There are going to be many different nuclei that are going to be located in the thalamus. So what nuclei are collections of cell bodies. And this is where a lot of synapsing and relaying is going to occur in the brain. There is actually a piece of connective tissue that will kind of separate these nuclei into three groups: the anterior nuclei, the medial nuclear group, and the lateral nuclear group. We're not going to go through each and every single nucleus. I just want you to be aware that the thalamus is divided up into separate regions called nuclei. So what is the function of the thalamus? The thalamus acts as a relay station for sensory information. So almost all conscious sensory information has to go through the thalamus first. The only exception of this is the olfaction or smell. Smell doesn't go through the thalamus. Rather, it is sent directly to the limbic system, which is responsible for helping form memory and different emotions. So olfaction goes directly to the limbic system. So the other sensory information will have to travel through the thalamus, and the thalamus is going to act as a gateway to the cerebral cortex. So any sensory information has to synapse in the thalamus, and then from there, information will be sent forward into the cerebrum, where that sensory information can be processed and connected to other information in our brain. So that is pretty cool. Not only is sensory information going to have to go through the thalamus, every part of the brain that has to send a signal or to the cerebral cortex has to go through the thalamus. So really, the thalamus is a major gateway to the cerebral cortex. So anything that has to go to the cerebral cortex has to pass through the thalamus, with the exception of olfaction. Any information that goes to the thalamus is going to be processed before it can pass on. And so what the thalamus does is it actually helps organize that information so that the sense of smell, sense of sight Hearing and other information can be sent to the correct region of the cerebral cortex. And also, this is my favorite part of the thalamus, and I think my favorite part of the brain overall, is that it can actually amplify or tone down the signals headed to the cerebral cortex. So it plays a really important role in attention and processing sensory information. Our body is receiving so much sensory information all at once, and it would be extremely overwhelming to be conscious of all of this sensory information to the same amount and all at the same time. So the thalamus really helps figure out what's important right now for this situation. So your textbook gives the example of being in a crowded cafeteria and having a conversation with your friend. In that crowded cafeteria, there is different lights, people are moving around, there's going to be clinking of glasses, clinking of silverware, lots of conversations all around you. The sensation of the clothes on your skin, maybe your shoes are too tight. There's a lot of different things going on right at the same time. So the thalamus can help you process that information so that you can focus and draw your attention to what is important. So the thalamus is going to tone down most of that information, so it's not going to have you focus on other people's conversations. Rather, it's going to help you focus specifically on the conversation that you're having with your friend. So it can help kind of draw your attention to what is most important. So I think that is amazing. I love the thalamus. It's super cool. I really like studying it. So I hope you're geeking out with me, or you find a different part of the brain that you think is equally as fascinating. Let's talk about the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is going to be ventral or inferior to the thalamus, and it's going to actually be it's actually going to form the inferior parts of the third ventricle. The hypothalamus almost looks like a bird's beak, and connected to it is going to be the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus and the pituitary gland work very, very closely together and are connected to each other, either by blood vessels or nerves, depending on the region of the pituitary gland. And they will work together in regulating most of the glands of the endocrine system. So it will help regulate the hormonal response of our body. So what does the hypothalamus do? Well, a lot. So it's going to be the primary visceral control center. And so really it's going to play a huge role in controlling our, homeostasis. Homeostasis is the internal dynamic balance that occurs in our body. So there is certain kind of set points or ranges that are considered normal for the body, like a normal heart rate, normal body temperature, those sorts of things. And the hypothalamus is going to kind of help regulate that environment. So what are some of the things that it will regulate? It can actually control the autonomic nervous system, so it can help control the fight or flight nervous system. It can help control the parasympathetic nervous system, so sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, so it can control those responses. It can regulate our body temperature, so it can make sure that our body temperature stays at 37 degrees Celsius. Or if we're sick and the body has to have a fever to fight off infection, the hypothalamus will reset the body temperature to be a bit higher, so the body can have a fever to fight off that infection. It can regulate thirst and hunger. So thirst is a really important way of regulating blood pressure in the long term, and it will also regulate our ion concentration. It can also tell us when we're hungry. So like if we need a higher amount of glucose, that would be a good time. It can regulate our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle. It also controls other factors. It can control our endocrine system, our hormones of our body, help control our emotional responses and motivational behavior, and help with the formation of memory. The last three are due to the fact that the hypothalamus is part of the limbic system. It's kind of a collection of organs that work together. And these are some of the functions of the limbic system. So the emotional response, motivational behavior, and memory. So there are a lot of different functions for the hypothalamus. I would just be familiar with a few of them. You don't have to memorize each and every single one. Then we have the epithalamus. The epithalamus is going to be the dorsal part of the diencephalon, and it's going to form the roof of the third ventricle. And one of the primary structures that is in the epithalamus is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is responsible for making melatonin, and melatonin is going to help control our circadian rhythm. Our circadian rhythm is our body's internal clock, and it will regulate our sleep-wake cycle, and it will regulate when we're hungry and when we're tired. And it will allow our body organs to work in coordination at the correct time of day. And the melatonin is going to play a really important role in synchronizing those body functions so that the organs are working together as a unit. So you may have heard of melatonin before, and melatonin sometimes can be used as a sleep aid. It doesn't make you sleepy directly. It acts upon your circadian rhythm to help kind of reset that kind of internal body clock. Melatonin is really controlled by the light and dark cycle of the day. When it gets darker, what will happen is the pineal gland will start to produce and release melatonin, and this will help initiate the circadian rhythm to help the body to be a little bit more sleepy. Light will actually reduce the amount of melatonin that the pineal gland will make. This is why it's imperative not to have your phone or computer in bed, because the light that comes off of these devices mimics the blue light in sunlight, and so it prevents the pineal gland from producing melatonin, and it will make it more difficult for your circadian rhythm to stay in sync, and it make it more difficult for you to fall asleep. So if you're having difficulty sleeping, put away that phone, put away that computer into a different room, and don't keep it next to your bed. Also, another thing that melatonin is used for in other organisms, other mammals, is regulating seasonal reproduction. So other mammals actually reproduce at certain times during the year, and melatonin can help regulate that reproduction cycle. So thank you for listening to our discussion of the diencephalon. I will see you in the next video, and have a good day. Be good to yourselves. Bye-bye.